everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Black Tea. This is the podcast that is all about Black women in advertising, brought to you by Muse by Cleo. I'm your host, as usual, Michelle Lawrence, and I'm really happy to be here with, all the way from across the pond, Natasher Beecher. Hey, Natasher.
Hello.
Welcome to Black Tea. Please tell people what you do and where you're based.
Sure. So I'm the creative lead based out of London for a health and wellness advertising agency called Tank Worldwide, which is part of the Grey Group. So if you know Grey Advertising, then Tank is kind of part of that big family. And essentially, I direct the creative for a lot of the global work that we do, which is, broadly in health and wellness. But and I'm also the ECD for POC, which is an organization that seeks to bring parity to the global majority in our creative industries. And so we do campaigns, consulting, activism. And for example, we did the Disney UK Christmas ad, The Stepdad, a couple of years ago as well. So lots of fingers and lots of pies.
Yeah. Okay. So ACD at one company, ECD at another company. And do those companies have anything to do with each other, or are you just holding down two full-time jobs out here?
I mean, that's just what I've always done, to be honest. Like, one of them is kind of the full-time day job, and then POC, when that started about 5 years ago. Since then I've kind of been dipping in and out and, working on a project by project basis. But
got it.
I guess the two complement each other, shall we say.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I think this might be the first time on Black Tea, we've done 3 seasons of this show, that we've had a here in the US we call it medical advertising creative. You are calling it health advertising. That's different. That's cool. So I would love to ask, because I know at least in our culture, a lot of creatives don't see medical advertising as a place to really make an impact, to make impactful work. But I know that you say that you feel like health advertising is in a great position to lead the charge in inclusivity. So can you talk a little bit more about that, why you think so?
Yeah, I think what we do in health and wellness advertising is inherently purpose driven. And I think we've got a lot of people within our industry that are both creative and kind of have that scientific way of thinking. And when you combine those two things, I think it really, you can be really, really happy. So if you're somebody, in the industry that is super, super creative, but you've maybe felt like, you want to use another part of your brain, then health advertising can be really for you. And it's interesting, actually, that you should say that there's, in the US, you have, you call it medical advertising. I think health, it is slightly broader than medical, because obviously you've got pharma, you've got health, and those two things are slightly different. One of them has a lot more regulatory kind of barriers, and I've worked across both pharma and health. But if we're talking about health versus medical, I think there is a bit of a difference, and you can definitely be a lot more creative with health advertising. And I like to say that we do kind of health adjacent stuff as well. So that includes wellness, it includes kind of, medicalized treatments and that sort of thing. So it's anything to do with, wellness for the world, wellness for humanity. That's kind of where health and wellness sits.
Thanks for clearing that up. Are you or copy, by the way? What's your focus?
So my craft background is in copy.
Okay, cool. How did you get into advertising?
Wow, it's a long story.
Okay.
I didn't go to ad school, which is, I'm not sure how common that is anymore. Well, in the UK, I think pretty much all creatives go to ad school. But I think coming from an immigrant heritage with Jamaican grandparents, there was always a certain amount of pressure to not be a singer or an athlete or, any of those kind of entertainer Black tropes at the time in the kind of 80s and 90s.
Something serious.
Something serious, a real job.
Real job.
A real job. So, even though I always really wanted to study art and I loved music and I loved being in plays and entertaining, I kind of, was like, okay, I'll do, medicine, or I'll do law, or I'll do engineering. It's kind of, it's a typical thing from our community and from, the way that a lot of us were brought up.
Yeah.
And so I ended up doing pharmacy, but my plan was always to, be a pharmacist by day and then a writer by night. That was the plan.
Yeah.
But then halfway through my degree, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not gonna, it's not gonna satisfy me being a pharmacist. So I was doing quite a few jobs at the same time as studying. But then I also started looking at ways to bring creativity into my degree. So I kind of changed my dissertation in my undergrad. I started doing, I did a medical writing internship in Switzerland. I did a couple of magazine internships. So as a editor and writer. Nice. And then I kind of ended up working as a science editor for Thomson Reuters, which is kind of, those that you don't know, it's kind of, it's Reuters. It's the biggest news agency basically in the world. So I was doing that for about 4 years. And we actually shared an office space with Gray.
Okay.
Got an office space, a building. So I was in the lift with somebody, and because I'm quite chatty generally, and they were kind of like, oh, like, what kind of writing do you do? Is that like advertising? And I was like, no, I've been told it's really competitive. And they're like, oh, there's health advertising, So then from that point, that's where I found out about advertising. And
wow,
I started to build this portfolio, which I had no idea was a thing up until that point. And it took me about 7 years, and I took lots of different jobs. So I started a radio program. I was doing quite a lot of other kinds of writing. And I took a side job as a PR director for a small tech company. And then at that point, I was like, I'm ready to get in. And I got my first job at DDB Remedy as a copywriter. So it was kind of, as I say, it's a long story, but it's
No, I'm always interested to hear about the Black experience in other parts of the world, but there are definitely some similarities that I can hear in your story. A lot of women that I speak to, myself included, found advertising in a kind of roundabout way. Like, it's not necessarily one of those legacy careers that exists in our culture where we have aunts and uncles who did this and we saw their job and it was cool every now and then. Yes, but for the most part, it's news to us that this is even a thing that we could be doing with our creativity, for sure. So that was I had the same influence. My parents were like, okay, steady job though. And I think they didn't even have to say that to me. I think it was just like something that I was saying to myself because of just like society and having to like survive. And so I was a fine arts major, but the way that manifested for me was, okay, well, I'm just going to teach art, because I really didn't know anything else that I could do with it and get a steady job. So I did that for a few years before I found out about advertising. But I think it's interesting. We all have different paths, and I believe that those are still very much at play in what we end up doing once we get here and what we bring to the table. So
100%.
When the industry broadens its, gaze, if you will, for where we are picking up people. And I think that's, it's all the more the merrier.
100%. And I think as well, having that non-traditional route into what we do makes us better at what we do, because we're looking at things from a completely different perspective. We're outside of the proverbial box. We're, thinking about things that many other people who have come in through the traditional way won't even occur to them. And add that to kind of that cultural lived experience as well as the kind of different way in. You've got yourself some pretty special people. So
yeah. And I think that's really what makes the work rich. You're totally right. Speaking of which, what has been your experience with in the advertising industry with being your full self at work? You have creative energy just dripping all off of you. And I'm wondering if that was something that was always, if you found it easy to kind of exist in the advertising space, amongst, a lot of folks who maybe don't look much like you. What has that experience been like for you? How much have you felt like you can be yourself as you've moved throughout your career?
I think the kind of more senior I've got, the more comfortable I felt. But I also think that because of, I can't really hide myself very well, and I kind of wear my personality, literally I wear it. So it's I've kind of just learned that there's nothing really that I can do apart from just show up as much as myself as I can. Although there was this one incident actually years ago where I was told by a boss that he was worried that my colleagues might think I come across as confrontational.
We all hear that one.
You know that one? And it really, really affected my confidence, as you can imagine. And what I did was I kind of, because it was so out of the blue and so not how I understood, because I'm quite, aware, self-aware of how I come across for those reasons anyway. I kind of sought some feedback from the different teams, and it's turned out that it wasn't true at all. All the feedback that I actually had was literally the opposite. And so when I think about whether or not I'd do anything different in hindsight, I'd maybe want to be quicker about, not trusting or not being so naive that people aren't going to use these tropes and these stereotypes, because they will, hopefully there'll be less of it, but people will put us Black women in these boxes. And I should remember that these comments, they should be taken with a grain of salt. I shouldn't let them reflect badly on the way that I feel about myself and move through confidently. So that was really a pivotal moment for me to just kind of say, I'm going forward with continuing to be myself authentically in as safe a way as I can. Because, I'm a Black woman, I'm a gay woman, and there's all of these things. And in fact, I've had an equal amount of people underestimating me because I look so young. And I know that's it feels like a first world problem right now because I'm not, but I do come across as young. So recently I was at Cannes, I was a judge at Cannes, and I could tell people how did you, I'm like, I've been in this industry for 17 years. Come on, don't underestimate what I'm capable of. So
that's right. And I think it's easier said than done, though. Don't let it affect you. Don't let it seep in, because especially, I mean, from what you're telling me, you are a high performer just all throughout your academic career as well. You get used to nailing it. And when someone makes you feel like you're not nailing it, or that it's not, that you're dropping the ball on something, or you're being weird, it's very, the tendency is to want to overcorrect that. So I mean, you went on a little journey. You got feedback from other people. You investigated to see, am I really being confrontational? Which I think is, a way to do it as well, for sure. To sort of, ground, I think it's always helpful when you can come with receipts to sort of say, actually, I'm getting this type of feedback on paper from everybody else. So is it my colleagues or is it you? But I think it's definitely, that's something that's easier to do as you get more senior, for sure. I think that it is something that I think we also just have to be able to recognize that it isn't us. So I think if I could give my earlier self, any career advice there, it would be to not internalize it and let it make me feel like I didn't know who I was. Or maybe I am terrible. Maybe I am really mean. It's I used to take care of people's 6-year-old kids, you know what I mean? And they were safe with me. So I feel like maybe these adults can also be safe with me, and I can still say what's true. So I think that's huge. It's a hard thing to sort of just to do and feel. But I think it's a good reminder for ourselves and for the young women out there in advertising starting out. Not that you need to have an, impenetrable armor, but that you need to know who you are. So that, folks aren't defining that for you.
Exactly. And the way that I think about it is, if I was, gonna speak to my younger self or another young Black woman and give that kind of advice, it would be to do just that, to stay focused, to remember who you are and how your lived experience has made you ready for so many situations. And one of the things that I remember myself all the time when I'm in these kind of imposter syndrome situations, which happens more often than you might think, I always remember that even when I'm only giving 40%, that's more talent than those people with default identity, let's call them, who somehow make it to the top, seem to be able to give at their 100%. And so that's what I try and do, and it does work. And you just remember, actually, yes, I am this good, and I'm gonna keep moving forward and remember that. So younger people or less experienced people, I should say, remember that.
You have a lot of passion projects. You are also into film and TV writing, is that right? You want to talk a little bit about that? Also, I know that you run, you climb. How do these passion projects impact your advertising work?
I think they all input into it, to be honest, like because of my neurodiverse brain, I'm always looking for the next kind of exciting thing to be doing. So I tend, even though I'm doing all of these things, I quite often dip in and out of them. So I've got, 3 different unfinished film scripts that, that I've got on the go. And one of them also has an accompanying novel that I'm trying to write at the same time.
Wow.
Finding time for all of this stuff is obviously really difficult, the more other things that I end up not saying no to. But yeah, I think it just really helps, again, with that perspective, like thinking, putting yourself in other people's shoes, looking for people that aren't, or experiences that are unlike any that you've had before. That's what I try and bring into advertising, and not just health advertising, but general advertising as well. It's kind of that diversity of thought, that diversity of lived experience. And so by doing all these different things, I gain a little bit of an insight into, what it is like for all of these different kinds of people. And it means that when I'm, meeting people and having conversations with people, I usually am able, I don't think there's ever been a time where I haven't been able to find a common ground. And so that common ground is what I think can drive the insight for great advertising. It's finding that insight. It's applying, that common feeling that everybody has as a human, applying that and making sure that it speaks to everybody. So it's kind of important to my work, but it's also important to my life to just be able to hear people,
Yeah. Is there a project that has like most manifested itself in? If you had to pick a favorite, or just even one that's just near and dear to your heart, in the health space, what would that be?
In the health space, now, I think a lot of my proudest things have actually been outside of the health space. So
we're outside of the health space. That's fair game too.
I mean, the work that I've done in the past with POC, so that's obviously close to my heart. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing like a whole nother job. But we did a project called Making Britain Great Since.
Okay. ...
And it was about telling the stories of people of colour in the United Kingdom and in Great Britain, and through the eyes of their ancestors. So it was kind of going to our community, finding out how their ancestors kind of arrived on the British shores, and telling that story through kind of a poetic, not even infographic, a poetic narrative that then went on the website. We put it on billboards all over the UK, and it was just really, I don't know, it made me feel like if this was the only piece of work that I left this planet having made, I'd be happy, like that is, it honored my grandma from Jamaica, it honored my parents, it showed that we can be people, because these are all prominent people in the advertising and creative industries that we put on those boards. So kind of talking about how they got to be as great as they are, and it kind of reinforced what makes Britain great. It's not just, a certain kind of person. There's more of us doing amazing things, and it was a beacon for people to kind of be like, yeah, I belong here.
So you're out here watching birds for the greater good. I need to know how, like, what does bird watching have to do with activism, and what is your involvement in that?
Sure. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I've got a friend, Ollie Olanipikan, who is creative director. He's kind of runs an agency, and he messaged a few of us and said, look, I really feel like I want our community to get back outdoors, and I've been bird watching for a while, so I've started this bird watching group with this other guy that I've met who's been, bird watching for like 15 years basically, who's in. So the first time we went, it was, there was about 12 of us that went, and we went to some wetlands. We all had a pair of binoculars, and it was just about reclaiming the outdoor space, because bird watching is one of those things that I certainly didn't think I'd be into until I was older. So it's reclaiming the spaces, you know, not over 60 white men, basically. And so it's a bird watching group for people of color, and through the flock together, we have, you know, really made a big impact on nature and reclaiming that space and the love of birds. We are innately challenging a lot of people's stereotypes of A, what a nature lover is, and B, what people of color do, you know. So it's like,
and who nature belongs to, who it's for. So I love that.
And so many people, like from that first, you know, 12, 15 people that were at that first walk, we get over 300 people signing up for each walk every month.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I just have one last quick question for you before I get you out of here, that I'd like to ask everybody who comes on. Are there any Black-owned companies or products that you're really loving right now?
As you can probably tell, I love hats.
Yes.
And so there's this bespoke maker and shoemaker based in London called Uptown Yardie. They're a British black brand with Jamaican heritage, and they make, they make beautiful, beautiful products. So they make kind of the really tall Amy hat, they make the Garvey hat, they make the most gorgeous broguing on their leather shoes, like bespoke leather shoes. So, you know, it speaks to my Jamaican heritage, and it's black owned, and this isn't one of their hats, actually. I was wearing one of their hats at Cannes this year, and I kid you not, the comments that I got when I was walking around wearing this hat, like, yeah.
Heads were turning. Uptown Yardie, got it. All right. Thank you so much, Natasha, for coming on. This has been really great chatting with you. You're making me want to skip back over to London and see what y'all got going on.
Come over.
I will come on back. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And everybody out there, thank you so much for watching Black Tea. Please make sure you go to musebykleyo.com/Black Tea to catch up on all the other episodes. And that's it. We will see y'all on the next one. Bye.